Hey y'all, this is Brown at IF Brown, and today I want to talk just a little bit about the passing of the actor Tom Sizemore. He passed away a couple of days ago at the age of 61, and he was an actor who, when he brought his A game to the table, excelled at his craft. But unfortunately, like many other artists, he struggled with the demons of drug addiction. And I mean, if you know someone who has gone through a drug addiction or is still dealing with drug addiction, then you have an idea of how all-consuming that addiction can be for someone. And unfortunately, Tom Sizemore, was one of many people who fell into that trap, and it was something that he's been dealing with, or he had been dealing with for most of his life apparently. I don't know everything about him, and I don't know exactly when it started, but I mean, it sounds, from what I understand, it sounds like it started when he was a teenager, and it went into around his final days. And so it was just really sad to read about that, because sometimes you hear about someone falling into addiction, and if you think that if they're a big time celebrity, you're thinking, well, that's a waste, because it's like, hey, they made it, they're making all this money, and they're in all these highly acclaimed movies and what have you. But unfortunately though, I guess it's just like people think that if you have a bunch of money and you're everyone recognizes you, that then, well, that doesn't really mean that you're not gonna deal with problems like addiction like everyone else. And so and one of the crazy things is when people who are celebrities are dealing with addiction, it seems like you would think that they would have way more opportunities to get help or get clean, what with their financial resources, whereas people like us, or just ordinary people, I mean, I don't know much about like how much it would cost to say get into a program or anything like that, but I would imagine that it's easier for someone who is kind of in the upper echelon of society to get into a program and get treated, whereas people who aren't celebrities, it's a lot more difficult, from what I understand. And so Tom Sizemore, he apparently tried multiple times to get clean, and some attempts they stuck for a bit, and then unfortunately they didn't stick for good. So I mean, there was one story where in Robert De Niro, his co-star from the movie Heat, Michael Mann's crime drama, there was a story where Robert De Niro and Tom Sizemore's own mother came to his home one day, and basically told him that they were there to take him to either rehab or jail. And so at that point in time, he chose rehab. So you have little stories like that, and of course it's just the drug addiction though, it just really destroyed him. And it was really sad because that everyone is susceptible to certain problems, but if it's, say, an artist who when you see them on their A game and clearly excelling at their craft, it's all the more tragic, because that this artist has what it takes, but they just for various reasons were consumed by their demons. Because I mean, if you look at Tom Sizemore in movies like, say, the aforementioned film by Michael Mann, Heat, which was probably one of the best crime dramas ever put to screen. He was in Heat with Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer, and a whole bunch of other very good actors. And of course Al Pacino. But then, also you see him in movies like Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days, and even, her movie Point Break, wherein he has, a brief but memorable role as, an undercover officer. And then you have him in, Black Hawk Down, and then what was probably his career best, his part in the movie Saving Private Ryan, where, he actually plays a good guy, under Tom Hanks, under, the character of Tom Hanks. And, it's, definitely one of the best war movies ever made, and, one of Steven Spielberg's best. And so everyone involved, that was like a career best. But you look at Tom Sizemore in that movie, and it's just like, my God, the guy could act, and so, I mean, those were, probably his, big hits, I guess you could say, or, the movies that, most people remember him from. But, I remember him, there was two movies I could think of, that come to mind, one of which I didn't think was that good of a movie, but I thought he was good in it, was a horror movie called The Relic. And, he plays one of the main characters in that movie, and he plays against type, wherein usually he plays a bad guy, but he plays a good guy. He's a police officer or detective, and his character was actually fairly likable and rather comical at times, maybe darkly comical, but I do remember that while the movie itself wasn't that good, in my opinion, like, he actually was good in it, if that makes sense. Another movie that comes to mind is Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers. And for me, I just, I guess I did like a lot of other people do, when, a celebrity, passes away that recognize, or at the very least admire their talent, you go through and look at some of the stuff they've been in, or you go on YouTube, look at some video clips, and of course, some of the stuff that popped up was from that movie. He played a corrupt detective who was in a lot of ways just as bad as the serial killer protagonists, as played by Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis. And Natural Born Killers is a very disturbing movie. It's a good movie, but it's a movie that you see it once and you probably don't want to see it again. Not because it's a bad movie, but just because of how disturbing it is, and in a very twisted way, the points it makes about society and what have you. But it's one of those things where the only good people in the movie are innocent victims, caught in the crossfire, whereas the protagonists, the main characters, they're all scumbags, including Tom Sizemore's character. And it's probably one of the most controversial movies from the 90s, for sure. So if you have a strong stomach, I would recommend, at the very least, renting Natural Born Killers. But if you don't, you might want to just read the Cliff Notes version, But anyway, though, I watched a couple of clips from that movie, just because, they popped up on my YouTube feed, with, the whole time Sizemore's passing and what have you. But there was this one scene in particular that I watched last night, and it was a moment where, everything just sort of came together, in terms of like his acting, as well as the dialogue and, the editing of the scene. Because what's happening is, his character, is in a prison. I mean, he's being escorted through a prison, and he's talking to the warden, and is played by Tommy Lee Jones. And his character, he has an obsession with serial killers, even though he's ironically one himself. He gets away with killing disposable hookers, but and every time you see him, I mean, like, you could say that the guy has what a lot of people would call villainous valor, in the sense that he's unrelenting in his pursuit of the villain protagonists in the movie, who are definitely scumbags and need to be put down. But the problem is, the main guy going after them is also a scumbag and needs to be put down. But there's this moment, though, where he's being escorted through the prison that the two serial killers are being held at, and he's making conversation with the warden, and he ends up telling the warden about the reason as to why he's so obsessed with serial killers. And at first he's very much as he is throughout the rest of the movie, like he's dropping F-bombs just like everyone else in the movie, and he's got very disgusting views on humanity and just life in general, and in a lot of ways, I mean, considering the stuff that he deals with when he's not killing disposable hookers, I mean, you can kind of see how it would warp someone. But then he gets to the reason as to why he's obsessed with serial killers. When he was a kid, he and his mom were out walking one day, and it was around a college campus, I think it was, and this sniper started taking pot shots. I mean, it's this student, I believe he was, went up into the bell tower and just started shooting people with a rifle. And this Tom Sizemore's character wasn't just a little kid, he was just a little boy, and he saw his mom get blown away by the guy. And he's saying how there was no sound. It was just he was walking with his mother one minute, and then next thing he knows, her chest explodes, and and everyone's either running or getting down or getting shot. And one line I remember is something along the lines of he was being eaten alive. He was hiding in the grass, and being eaten alive by ants, and wondering what happened to his mom, and he was terrified of it during the whole time, which, I mean, it's like that would mess anyone up. But it's one of those instances wherein how a villainous character, I mean, they're messed up and obviously they need to be stopped, they need to be put down or something. But you'll sometimes have a moment wherein you find out something about them, like something from their past, that it doesn't justify what they've done, but at the very least it explains to some point why they are the way they are. And sometimes that can be done rather poorly. Case in point, say Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. The way they did it with Carnage's character is that, I mean, he was like a homicidal maniac, but albeit one kind of neutered by a PG-13 rating, who right when he's about to buy the farm from Venom, Woody Harrelson, he chimes in and says something about how he was abused as a child and what have you. And we're talking like the last couple of minutes of on film that Carnage has, and it's like the people involved are just kind of like, yeah, throw in a sad childhood so the audience will feel sorry for him. It's like, well, here's the problem. You're throwing it in literally at the last minute, right at the climax, and he hasn't demonstrated any sort of sympathetic qualities prior to that. And so that was an instance where that technique was done poorly. Whereas here, though, in Natural Born Killers, you ironically have a very despicable character getting a genuine moment of humanity, because what ends up happening is as Tom Sizemore's character, as this corrupt detective, is telling his story to the warden, it's like you see all the chaos around them, because it's a maximum security prison. Inmates are being detained by guards and all over the place, and everyone's running around and what have you. But you have this moment though where Tom Sizemore, he's telling Tommy Lee Jones what happened to his mom, and how what he saw as a little kid, and you see from his perspective as a kid what he saw, and then you kind of see this vulnerability that just sort of comes out as he's telling the story, because he gets this haunted look in his eyes as he's walking with the warden, and he just gets this haunted look in his eyes, and he's in the moment, he's in the zone. And remembering everything as it happened and almost reliving it. But it's like he doesn't freeze up, he just keeps going. And then, the way they edited it was very fascinating, because, you have, this sort of soft music that suddenly, makes itself known. And, it cuts to, say, imagery of, butterflies, flying around each other, or, a couple of prisoners, playing a peaceful game of chess. And it was like, and then you also see him as a little kid, just kind of lost and looking around, and then it cuts back to him, and it's like, while all this imagery is being flashed, you'll kind of hear his voice, but sort of, going off into the distance, and his eyes are more and more haunted. And it was a very brief moment, but in that moment, though, it was like you saw that, as a lot of people in the comments section said for the scene, for one brief moment, you saw that even a scumbag like him was once an innocent child, and who was irreparably scarred by what happened. And so, it was a very powerful moment, I thought. It was definitely, as far as moments of, fine acting goes, I think it was probably one of Tom Sizemore's best moments, in the sense that he made a character who was so despicable, into, someone who was, for a moment, genuinely sympathetic. Just for a moment, mind you. But it was a very human moment, I thought. And the way the scene was directed by Oliver Stone, and then you had, the scene, the way it was edited and everything, and the choice of music, it was just a very brilliant scene. And so I would definitely say that, his, part in, Natural Born Killers was also, was also a career highlight. The reason I wasn't initially throwing that in the same, big name movies as, Heat or, Saving Private Ryan was simply because, Natural Born Killers is one of those movies that, it's a well done movie. It's a powerful movie, but it's a nightmarish movie that that most people, myself included, saw it once and it was like, okay, we're glad we saw it, but don't want to see it again. Whereas, something like Heat, we're like, hey, we could watch that anytime, that kind of thing. But anyway, though, so yeah, that was kind of my, just off the top of my head, and, just based on, some of this, stuff I rewatched last night, that was, I think, probably one of my, absolute, favorite moments of, Tom Sizemore's acting abilities. And so, it was just, one of those things where it's like, yes, he had, a very messed up personal life, but you can't deny that, when he was on, when he was in the zone, in terms of, acting, he was good. And so, yeah, so I just, wanted to, talk just a little bit about that. And so, if anyone's, got any, thoughts on it, what, if y'all got any favorite, moments from, movie of his that, kind of come to mind, I'd love to hear them, but, definitely, rest in peace. It's sad that, he was never, able to fully beat, his addictions. And, but unfortunately, that's something that happens, in real life with a lot of people, whether you're famous or not. And so, yeah, best to his family. Hope they're doing okay in this time of grief. And, but yeah, thanks for, taking a moment to, check this out and, listen to, some thoughts on the matter. And hope you all have a good day. Take care. Bye.